We started. Okay, sounds good. Yeah, so thank you everyone for joining our Spatial Biology Association meeting. Today we have a special session that is focused on job perspectives in the field of spatial biology, and we want to explore both academic and industry opportunities. We have today, for today's agenda, we have Ryan Petroff here, who is a technical recruiter specializing in data science and software roles. He's gonna give a little overview talk, and to give you some background, Ryan has a deep understanding of the big tech. Oh, sorry. Can you please all, let me see if I can please mute everyone. Okay. Sorry. So Ryan has a deep understanding of the big tech and healthcare industry and the career options that are possible in these areas. He actually spent 4.5 years at Verily Life Sciences, where he made more than 200 hires. But right now he's on his own as the lead technical recruiter for Alliance Recruiters, working on similar roles for clients like Dana-Farber, Cancer Institute, or Alphabet. And Ryan will give us a little overview of the job landscape and career paths in the field, both industry and academia, which will be around 15 to 20 minutes. And after that, we will open a discussion. We have experts here, 2 people from who have just started their lab in academia, and 2 people who moved to research positions in industry. And I will introduce them after Ryan's talk, and they are happy to share their experiences and discuss with you the common questions that you may have about life and career decisions. So thanks, first of all, Ryan, and please go ahead.
Excellent. Well, thank you for the warm introduction. And so again, just to give some background, my name is Ryan Petroff. I do not have a PhD. We can start with that. I have but a lowly Bachelor of Arts in linguistics. And I was wondering, geez, what career opportunities can I use with linguistics? I knew I didn't want to be a linguist. And so senior year, it was the career fair. I was like, oh, time to write a resume and do this. So I looked for, hey, who's hiring for linguistics majors? And the drop down said, your search returned 0 results. I was like, okay, great. So who's hiring for all majors then? And it was this company, Insight Global. And so in my mind, I was like, global, linguistics, language, this is a perfect fit. Let's do it. And so I asked them what they did. They said recruiting. Ultimately, they gave me an offer and 24 hours to decide on it. And I've been a recruiter ever since. So I did start with Insight Global, which is down in San Diego. To give everyone some background, this is a meat grinder type of role. It is a clean shaven, suit and tie, 7:30 to 5:30, get back on the phone type of position here. And I look back on it sort of with a chip on my shoulder, but I'm still so very grateful for the work ethic and just routine that it embedded in me. So afterwards, I was at Verily Life Sciences for almost 5 years. And this is where most of my technical recruiting experience really came into play. So I started with the software roles, eventually moved into the engineering and AI orgs. They did have me work on every single role that existed in the company. So I have a pretty good understanding of how they all piece and fit together here. And then I have now recently just started on my own with Alliance Recruiters here, which has been quite the journey so far. So hope it's going to continue going well. There are, of course, more options to choose from, but we're going to focus here really just on industry versus academia. And I think, one key answer is that the one you feel best about in this moment is going to be fine for you. The reality is it's a lot easier than you think to switch between industry and academia, vice versa as well. And so I'm really going to be drawing on a lot of the candidates that I have with conversations in a similar spot where I imagine you all would be. Either, should I move into industry? Should I move back to academia? What are going to be the main things to consider here? So we can just jump into it. And so if you do have any questions throughout this call, feel free to just put it in the chat. And I'll do my best to sort of answer it as we go, or we've got some time at the end. But Really, this is your meeting, and I want to make sure that everyone is getting the information that you guys need from it. So, okay. A quick note before we jump in: life is not about living to work or working to live, but about choosing your path and enjoying it with the people close to you. This is something to keep in mind just as you do choose any path, because there's, whether it's industry or academia, there's a sort of mindset that I assume people on this call have where it can just be all encompassing. Oh, Ryan, I think about my research work 40, 50, 60 hours a week. How would I ever go into industry there? And so I think just taking a deep breath and, realizing that life is short is going to be something that I try to do every day. So we can jump into it here. We'll start with industry, since because of bias, this is really where most of my experience lies here. If you talk to your colleagues or classmates that have gone into industry, I can just about guarantee the first thing they're going to tell you is, "Ooh, I have so much total compensation. Someone's cooking me food at the office every day." And so, and these are, it's really exciting to get that. And so I'll quickly just sort of break down what total compensation means in industry. You, of course, have your base salary. This is the, amount that gets paid out to you either on a biweekly, weekly, or monthly basis. Some companies will also have bonuses as well. The details are always going to differ company by company, but somewhere on the range of like 10 to 15% of your base salary seems to be pretty industry standard. And then we'll also quickly talk about equity as well. If you are in a publicly traded company, like if you get hired at a Google or an Amazon of the world, they will give you a base salary, a annual bonus, and then also some equity in the company. If the company is public, this is going to be an RSU, a restricted stock unit. You don't need to know this basically, but it's going to be you can get the same equity that anyone trading on their favorite phone app is going to be able to get as well. If you get equity in a privately held company, one that has not gone public yet, it might be options in the company. It might actually be a percentage of the company. And really, what's key to note about this is that it does not have a true cash value. That private equity does not have a true cash value unless you go public, unless you get acquired or have some liquidation event like that. So as you're reading the contracts, just pay double close attention to whatever's outlined in the equity field. The other main considerations here are going to be the fast-paced environment. So most of my experience comes from the Silicon Valley industry and the Boston medical industry. These, on the whole, tend to be very fast-paced, very, very performance-driven, and clients that have very tight deadlines and high expectations. And so one of the things to do as far as getting an actual product on the market is this idea of a cross-functional working style. And so, if you're thinking about the academia side, you've got a lot of freedom to decide what you want to work on, when you want to work on it, really how it's going to look there. And so you definitely trade a lot of that intellectual freedom for an industry role here. And as you go through about the actual development process here, and everyone has different terms for it, but really it comes down to working fast and failing fast, so that any feedback that you can get along the process, you're able to iterate into that next development timeline there. And so, like let's say, okay, data scientist X or AI researcher Y has this great idea. They tell their project manager or their hiring manager about it, and they say, "Hey, that is a great idea. Let's get some other people involved in it." By the time you get product management, senior leadership, board approval on it, there's a high chance that whatever your original idea is going to be reshaped, tweaked, morphed into, a function that's going to be able to fit all the different needs of all the approving and validating parties. So you lose a lot of that intellectual freedom and just scope to have your product be the actual way that you want it as you go into industry. And then we can talk about real world impact as well. Depending on what company and what product you get put on there, as your product hits the market, or as a piece of technology hits the market, it can have impact on thousands, millions, and sometimes even billions of end users of this. If we choose the medical industry here, a lot of what you are going to work on is going to be put into clinics. It's going to be put into patients' lives. And so you can't sort of just hack something together and ship it out there in a sort of Silicon Valley, move fast and break things types of style here. But really in a clinical setting, it's going to have to be bulletproof. It's going to have to be secure, efficient, and scalable. In getting it to the point of having those attributes here is going to take a lot of work from that cross-functional working style as well. This is where you're working with the software teams, the data engineering teams, the approval teams, the board. So just as well, just something to keep in mind as we go throughout these different factors here. Organizational politics, this is present, I'm sorry to say, in both options that we have here. So whether it's industry or academia, and it really does increase as you get more and more senior in your roles. I don't really want to focus too much on this in this presentation here, but definitely know that it's going to be present. So I'll take a quick second just to talk about industry leveling, because this is, as far as like the frequently asked questions that I get from candidates with this similar type of background, they're normally about leveling. And so a great resource for everyone that I highly recommend you check out is levels.fyi. This is a great site where you can compare all the different, okay, how does Google look at data scientists compared to how does Amazon think about software engineers? What do they get paid? There's a ton of good data in there, although I will in all caps flag that this is all self-reported data. So the quality of the data, the quantity is definitely there. And so on the whole, there's a lot of general trends that seem to be right, but I'll cover maybe just a minute on leveling and then continue moving on. But L3, and again, the numbers are different for every single company there, but anything from the bachelor's or master's plus a couple of years, that's going to be at your sort of junior to mid-level or new grad level right there. These levels that I have up here are the ones from Alphabet. And so L4 is going to be your, if you're coming straight out of PhD, you come directly in at L4. Or if you're in that L3 plus a couple of years, maybe 2 or 3 years there, you can do it in less time, you can do it in more time. These are just the averages here. And then know that it gets increasingly harder to move up the ranks as you continue getting more senior. As you get to L5, this is where people start putting senior in their titles. And so it's either going to be L4 plus maybe like 4 years or so. Or I have known people that, we hired directly out of bachelor's, and in 4 years, they were already a senior engineer. So, all of this is going to be taken with a grain of salt. As you get to L6, this is really where you hear the word staff coming in. And then again, L7 is sort of senior manager. You can also choose to be senior staff engineer or researcher. And as you move up those ranks, it's really more about the experience of those years are going to be more weighted than the actual years of those experience. Industry on a whole tends to carry more weight as far as academic experience, but that again really depends on the company, the hiring manager, and the role as well. We can speak about academia here as well. Again, biased that my sphere of influence is somewhat limited in this scope, so I'm excited to hear from the other panel members as we continue on. But I think the main thing to highlight about academia is that intellectual freedom to pursue your own ideas. This is your baby. You get the full scope of work from it there. You get to decide what you want to work on and when you want to work on it. Of course, as long as it naturally goes under that own funding timeline. There are less cooks in the kitchen. So as far as that reshaping and morphing process of your ideas, it's still going to be there because there are other people and this is a team effort at the end, but less so. You're also going to have real world impact because I think it's interesting to say that a lot of people in industry will say, oh, this is where the real world impact is. Academia, it's all in industry there. And so I feel like they forget that a lot of the times, what their AI researchers at their own industry companies are using a lot of these academic papers to justify, how they're going to look at this next development process that's going to be able to help out their company. So a lot of the impact that you have in academia, a lot of the end consumers of your publications and your records there are the ones thinking about how can we put this into industry there. I was reading a study from 2021 in Nature about just the industry versus academia, what seems to be the biggest complaints. Over time, it looks like people, and again, this was Nature, I haven't fully double checked the study here, but over time, people do tend to be leaning more towards industry here. And I think one of the main reasons that was cited in that study is just this culture of publish or perish, which I know is going to be a phrase that everyone has heard before here. And so it might be the case, like, you're graded on 9 different things. And it seems like 2 of the most important are always the, grant writing and fundraising. And so as far as that, how that leads to career advancement there, it's going to be a little bit different from industry, which is more performance driven as well. We'll continue moving on. So what types of roles can you actually go into with this type of background? Honestly, any of them. I like everything on this list. Some of the best people that I've worked with have been people that, you know, have the PhD and the postdoc background there and really have that credibility as they try to go into industry in a ton of different roles. So for instance, data science is typically going to be a mix of machine learning, programming, statistics, and then whatever your domain specialty is going to be. AI researchers are going to be employed by companies to research some of the new methods and techniques that they can to solve their own business problems. Product management is really bridging the gap between the client's needs and the engineering capabilities and timelines. Business development, these are people going out to find new business, especially in the pharma world. You're going to see a lot of this. Management and leadership, I think people with that, you know, academic pedigree and background there, you know, typically it's a sign that, you know, you can execute independently, that you know how to run teams, that you can work with, you know, you can mentor other more junior people there. And these are the type of skills that are really translatable into industry and the management field. And I always want to list entrepreneurship there because you can do it yourself if you don't like how other people do it there. So funding is somewhat easier to get, but actually getting a product in the market, that's the really challenging point. So if you think you can do it on your own, I'd say go for it because people are ready to give you a shot. What types of industries can I go into? There's so many options. You might be snickering a little bit at the word, you know, everything from pathology to pornography detection, but I assure you, there are a ton of companies hiring for this, especially in the social media side. So companies like Snapchat, TikTok, and Meta, they have a desperate need for this role. And they're really looking at people with imaging backgrounds that are going to be able to sort of make a career pivot and go into this. You know, as a quick story, I was hiring for a staff data scientist with a specialization in proteomics. And so I found perfect candidate, Dr. Wang, professor out of University of Washington there. We get him through the interview process. He does very well. He does so well that he actually gets to the senior title with us. And then he says, "Hey, Ryan, I'm also interviewing at Amazon." And I was like, "Oh, I didn't know Amazon was doing something in proteomics. Like, you know, tell me more about it." And he goes, "Well, it's not really in proteomics, but as you know, Ryan, there's a lot of different applications for this actual type of technology. And they're trying to hire me for the fraud detection team for the European markets." And I mean, you know, do what you want to do, right? This is where they're just looking for qualified candidates to fill any sort of type of opening there. So it might be the chance that you lose some of that intellectual freedom over your own scope of work, but potentially over your own scope of specialization here as well. I remember we gave him some crazy package. It was almost $400,000 per year total compensation. And Amazon was like closer to 600. I think they were like 160K every year more than us. And we kept coming back to it. And I was like, "Dr. Wang, we just can't change anything on the compensation. Like, this is what it is. Like, it sounds to me like money is the key motivating factor for you. So it's no secret, like go to Amazon. They're going to pay you the most realistically." He actually emailed me the next day and said, "Ryan, had a sleepless night, but like my gut just tells me I'm going to be happier doing this proteomics role. So I've just signed with Verily." So I'm happy to highlight that just because, I mean, it makes me look good, right? But also it's just that, you know, you've got a lot of power coming from purely academia with no industry. So just don't be afraid to use it. Don't be afraid to wield it as well. So I think if you're looking for more just potential imaging companies that you can go into, you've got your Roches, your GEs, your Genentechs, your Verily's there. If you want to go more into the sort of social media, as I said earlier, the Snapchat and TikTok companies. If you wanted to go, and again, I'm just using imaging as the domain here, but you can do it more on the hardware side as well. If you wanted to look at companies like Apple or Intrinsic, but really there's no limit. And companies right now, and especially hiring teams, are almost getting desperate just to find people that they know are going to succeed in this type of environment. And people with PhDs and postdocs over the long haul tend to do pretty well. Okay. We can look at some options in between as well. Again, have to mention that Dana-Farber Cancer Institute is one of my clients. They are the oncology branch of Harvard Medical School, and they sit really in between the clinic and the research institutions, and they figure out what pieces of AI should go into production in these different environments here. Another key plus for Dana-Farber Cancer Institute or any sort of cancer institute in that same type of space is access to the data. Ding, ding. Ooh, everyone always loves this. And so they've got millions upon millions of epic records that you can actually sort through. And when you think about deep learning and the actual scale of the data that you need to make it accurate, that's where finding the right medical data can be really challenging and what people are going to pay a lot of money to set up partnerships to actually get into there. I'm hiring for a pathology and data science role for them. Any type of imaging background is going to be great. Any sort of spatial transcriptomics is going to be a huge plus. If you've worked with any of the SciKIF, which is how I ultimately got connected with you on here, or MERFISH, or really any of the whole slide imaging technologies, that's really going to be a big plus. And so, but there again, besides Dana-Farber, there's plenty of other different opportunities that are going to be sort of more situated in the middle, where you still have that, sort of the best of both worlds, or you can get the best of academia, but also get that industry type of, compensation and recognition as well. So I'd say in summary, before we move on to questions, I'd say like the three main areas to consider as you think about whatever your next route is going to be would be total compensation, intellectual freedom, and those cross-functional workflows. Again, it's hard to generalize because you can find industry companies that are pretty small that so highly praise and value everything on the academic side, vice versa as well. Sometimes it can be completely different, but this is where, know your own strength and know your own value in this market. It's going to be a lot. And something that I've also signed up to do just for the community is, I've sort of set aside a couple hours a week. If you guys are either, hey, this is what I'm thinking for my next opportunity here, or, hey, I've got an offer on the table. What do you think about this? Should I be considering any other industries? I want to just lend a hand and do what I can for the community here. So if you are in a spot where you'd really like some sort of expert advice, always feel free to reach out to me. I've put my contact information on the next slide, and I'll be sure to send it out after this as well. But for any hiring managers looking for experts in this field, this is really as far as a business development opportunity, this is the exact niche that I'm trying to fill. And if you're postdocs roles looking to get into industry, always feel free to reach out for me here. So this last slide is the contacts and the links. Ryan@alliancerecruiters.com is my work email. I've also got my LinkedIn there as well. Please do connect with me. And then I've got my personal Gmail as well. So that's really the meat of what I wanted to talk about today. So I don't know if any questions came in through the chat, but just take a quick second to say thanks for all the time and listening to me. And I'm excited to answer any questions as they come up.
Great. Thanks so much, Ryan. If you have any questions right now, feel free to raise your hand or type them in the chat as well. And as Ryan mentioned, I also wanted to highlight that he kindly agreed for us as a community, for members of the community, to set aside a few slots on demand to go over any job-related questions per month. That will be like 30-minute sessions. So we can see, depending on how much of a demand we have, we may want to send out a sign-up sheet, and then we can assign these slots to community members. But yeah, this will be a possibility, and we can definitely share more information on that. And then a second announcement is also that we will have a few job postings also coming onto the website at some point. So stay tuned for that. We'll let you know once that is up.
I just checked, but I don't know.
Okay.
No.
I don't think we have any questions right now, but feel free to raise your hand anytime. Otherwise, I would also like to introduce, we have one here from Katie. If you want to unmute yourself and ask yourself, you can surely do that. Otherwise, I can read it out.
I can just read it. So I'm currently finishing up my PhD, and I'm interested in going into industry. And I guess the question sort of is, do I do a postdoc beforehand or not? And like, is there a benefit in terms of like long-term career advancement in industry if I were to do a postdoc? Do I have more of that intellectual freedom than if I just had a PhD?
Gotcha. That's a great question there. And, the answer is going to be potentially different with every company and role that you're looking for. But I would say go for it. And, there's an option where you can say, all right, I want to interview for these industry companies. And just to keep my options open, I'm also going to interview for these postdoc positions. I think that's a pretty good risk mitigating strategy to move forward on there. A lot of what some of the work that you do in your PhD, it might work for this specific, niche type of problem that you're trying to solve, but it may not be super repeatable. It may not be super scalable. And as you get into postdoc positions, this is really where more of that cross-functional working style is going to come into play. And so if I'm looking at a resume and I see someone's got their PhD, oh, awesome, it has a postdoc in a related field. And in that, in the experience to say, working cross-functionally with other people there, and just sort of some of those main highlight points, like that's really exciting to me as a recruiter. And I definitely give a call. I mean, I feel like even if the experience from the PhD is listed plainly enough and is going to be relevant to what we're doing at this company, I'd probably also still call as well. But a postdoc is never a bad option there. I think as far as like the funding timelines can go, again, a little bit different with every sign, but once you have that postdoc experience, that gives you a little bit of breathing room to say like, okay, now I can really be strategic on how I want to move forward in the industry, if and when that does type of happen. So I know people don't love to hear, oh, it depends for every single answer there, but I'd say that's my best answer for you there, Katie.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's also a great question to have two of our speakers reply to that as well, because we have Jamie Marshall and Giorgio Gaglia. You may want to help me out with your pronunciation of the family name. Jamie is a principal scientist in R&D at Solid Biosciences. She previously worked at the Broad Institute as a senior group leader and research scientist 1 and 2, and did her graduate studies at UCLA and postdoc at Boston Children's Hospital. So she has definitely insights into both worlds, I would say, and can maybe give a little bit of her advice and insights into the comparison between academia and industry. Giorgio leads the discovery and validation group in the single-cell biology cluster at Sanofi in the US in R&D. The group applies data analytics, machine learning to single-cell transcriptomics, spatial transcriptomics, and proteomics. And he has a master in applied mathematics from Oxford University, a PhD in systems biology from Harvard, and he did his postdoc at MIT, where he used, among other techniques, highly multiplex immunofluorescence within the cancer microenvironment. So introducing those, we have two more speakers from academia that I'll introduce afterwards, but maybe adding to that question that we had before, what is your perspective on doing postdoc versus no postdoc for industry positions in general? What are the factors that you would consider pro or con?
Do you want to go ahead, Jamie? Or...
You can go first if you want to.
Okay, sure. I think well, there's a couple of things. I think the postdoc position allows you to do two things that I found a little harder in academia, or at least potentially harder, which is A, change field and develop a skill that you might not have had. And that's a little trickier in industry because you have to convince someone to hire you to do something that you don't know how to do, which is not impossible, but trickier. And two, it kind of gives you the time to scour the industry positions with a little more calm. And because I think, and to keep it brief, I think there's so much industry opportunities that it can be overwhelming. And when you do get one, they want to act fast. You have like a week to make up your mind, or basically lose the position. And so you really want to be able to find the right place where you can do what you want to do. And it's most likely out there, given the choice opportunity, but you have to have the time not to be really rushed. And I'm sorry for the PIs in the crowd, but selfishly, but openly using a postdoc to do that is not a bad idea. The last point is that, if I hired someone, a couple of people, and those were both at postdocs, they were able to demonstrate the ability to develop independent projects in a way that post a PhD sometimes maybe don't know how to communicate, or it depends on the PG, of course, but so demonstrating the ability to lead your own projects and hence have growth potential is another thing that, as a principal scientist hiring or as a group leader hiring in industry, is very important.
Yeah, so from my perspective, I actually used my second postdoc to collaborate with industry. And so I went to a position specifically where they had an industry funded project, and it was with Pfizer. And so I got to know all of like 3 different positions at Pfizer and work with them very closely for 2 years while we were testing out drugs for muscular dystrophy. I will say from then I actually went to the Broad Institute, which is a little bit different. It's like not traditional academia. It's kind of a hybrid in academia and industry, and it was a lot of fun. And so I stayed there for quite a few years, from 2014 until last year, December last year. And from there, I actually became a senior group leader, which is also not quite a PI, but also like sort of like a PI. So I had my own grants, my own funding, my own projects, my own people, my own team. And it was a lot of fun, obviously, for the reasons we listed, where you can do a lot of work in academia that you want to pursue that you aren't able to do in industry. Like you can go in different directions. And then my lab, aside from me, was well funded. And so we got to do a lot of really exploratory, fun projects, which you don't get to do to the same degree in industry. But what I found after being a senior group leader for like 4 years is I eventually had to like commit to the PI lifestyle, where I needed papers, I needed grants, and you need those things to cycle, right? You need to get like the big paper to get the next big grant. And I wasn't really interested in doing that anymore. I wasn't learning anything new. I kind of reached a plateau. And so that's when I moved into industry. I will say that it was difficult to move into a high enough level position in industry since I had been in academia for so long. Because they basically said, like, you don't have industry experience, and a lot of the higher level jobs want 5 to 7 years of industry experience. So I ended up moving into a muscular dystrophy company, which was my background. I'm very passionate about muscular dystrophy, and into a position of starting a new program. And if you think about it in academia, that's what you do a lot, right? You start new programs from scratch. Within, I would say, 3 months of being there, we went through a layoff and a complete reorganization. And so I got assigned to a completely different role, which I can talk about more, but I'm basically managing a lot of the non-clinical stuff for an IND. So that's when you get a drug ready and prepared to go into the clinic. And so you're doing toxicology studies at the very late stage. I'm also running like a phase 0 observational clinical trial. And then I have a third project doing like some biomarker work, but more like helping other scientists who are actually doing the work, kind of advising them. We actually, like 2 weeks ago, are going through another reorg. We just acquired another company. We're getting a new CO, new CSO. A lot of things are changing, and I don't really know what it's going to look like in December when the deal closes. But I'm now currently, the program that I'm working on is the lead program. So at least short term, while we're filing the IND, my program will stay and I'll be stable. But what that also means in industry is it's very goal driven. You have to meet your milestones. You have to design your milestones really well so you can actually meet them. And then when you're doing a lot of these late stage IND enabling studies, like nothing can go wrong. We can't kill any animals. There can be no unexpected tox. So we'll see. Hopefully it all goes well. But if it doesn't go well, like that could be another thing where if my program gets killed, like potentially you're looking for a new job, just because like the program has ended. So long-winded, I think postdocs are useful because you can gain more experience, like Giorgio said, and then you can also like look for these industry collaborations if you're interested in eventually going into industry. It's a good way to network and get to know people and then understand like what people actually do day to day in industry.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. Okay, I also want to hear from our academic guest speakers here. We have Elizabeth Neumann. joining on the call, who is an assistant professor at UC Davis in the chemistry department, and just started her own research lab in July, so fairly new. She focuses on understanding the molecular and cellular architecture of neurological diseases using an interdisciplinary research that involves analytical tools as well as multimodal imaging methods to understand biological phenomena. And Elizabeth obtained her PhD in analytical chemistry at the University of Illinois and was an NIH postdoc at the Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. So let me introduce her first, and then I go over to Hartland. One question to get started with is, what was the main factor for you to go or stay in academia after your postdoc?
Do you want to go first, Hartland, or do you want me to?
No, I will introduce them afterwards. You will get the same.
Okay.
You can think about it already.
You're in the hot seat now.
Oh man. Okay. I mean,
take your time.
So I actually had multiple industry offers in the middle of my grad work and in the middle of applying for a postdoc, and then in the middle of my postdoc, and then I've still gotten some even as an academic, which is very comical to me. I really like working with students, and I really don't like being told what to do. So I decided to go and stay into academia because my other option was a small startup. But that said, I work really closely with a lot of industry partners. Like, I collaborate with them all the time. Some of them, I was going to say, so at UC Davis, most of our students go into industry, and because we're in ag school, we're super practical, so we understand that, and there's not this bias against not going into academia that exists at other places. But because of that, like, we have GSRs that are industry funded, and so like my students, I actually advise them not to do a postdoc, but it's because if a student's interested in a certain industry, people reach out to me all the time, / I reach out to them and then get them a GSR or like paid research from the company that they're interested in or the field. So they're killing two birds with one stone and saving time. I don't know, I've had a lot of luck with that. It's only been a couple of months, but the sheer amount of paid students I'm able to get with industry partnerships is wild. I have a lot of colleagues that have actually succeeded in doing that as well. So I don't know, I like it. We'll see. At some point you just have to pick and then follow the path forward. So GSR is graduate student research. So you're a RA, so research assistant instead of a TA. So GSRs are basically full funding. So you get tuition paid for, a stipend. It's usually higher than an RA stipend because it's funded externally. It's basically where the money is coming from. So an RA is usually an internal grant or a training grant or something. And GSR is external funding. So intramural or whatever.
Thank you. Okay, same question to our next guest speaker, Hartland Jackson. Hart started his own academic lab in 2020 in his hometown in Toronto at the University of Toronto. He considered both industry and academic job opportunities before that. And he did his PhD in memory stem cell and breast cancer research at the University of Toronto, and did a technology-focused postdoc at the University of Zurich before. So same question for you, what made you decide in the end to go for academia?
So I think the reason there's a lot of discussion on this is it's usually a very personal question, and it's also like, what options did you have at the time? And I say I investigated all of them because I did. I was talking to companies, talking to academic groups, talking to this, and you kind of, part of it is getting a feel for what the different roles would be and what the day-to-day would be. And I think, you know, to me, I kind of always say to people, it's like, okay, what were you thinking about excitedly as you were going to bed that night? What's the thing that stuck in your head? And then that's the decision usually your gut is telling you to go for. And I think it came down to the freedom thing and having things I was excited to do, and basically just, you know, the academic thing is someone hands you some keys and says, go. and that's it, which means there's a lot of freedom, but there's also maybe you figure out the responsibilities later. And that kind of appealed, I guess that appealed to what I was excited about and what I was been doing. I think there's a tough thing that if you've been in academia a long time, you do get into that mindset. Like you've been trained, like this is what I've been doing for, 10 years. And so you're going to value those things that you're used to and comfortable with. So I also think like, as you're looking to be looking and talking to people about jobs that there's a lot of people saying, I'm an academic person. And I'm like, well, but there are very research-driven industry jobs. So talk to someone who knows one of those, get a feel for what they're doing every day. And then I would say I also have, people in the lab, they're like, well, I want an industry job because it's stable. And then I think, you get the stories of what Jamie's saying, like, oh, there's an organizational turnover and you don't know what your department's going to be doing. And so having worked with an industry partner for a while, I had also seen that and seen iterations of that. And so I kind of was just judging on like, what's my day-to-day going to be? Am I going to be excited about that? And what is going to, Marie Kondo my life and bring me some joy? And that's kind of how the decision was made.
Thank you. Giorgio, you raised your hand. You too.
Yeah, I guess I've heard the freedom pitch a lot from my own postdoc advisor, for example. I think that one thing that one thing that I wanted to highlight that I didn't get as much of a sense how different it was. And I think that's something that should at least be considered by people that are considering both, is how much you like teamwork. Because in industry, of course, depends where you are, but if you work in a small startup, the whole company has a very, very narrow and very focused goal, and you all work for the same goal. It could be 10 of you, it could be 20 of you, it could be 100 of you. You win, everyone wins. There's no difference. Right now here, like it is harder, and I think Ryan mentioned there are hurdles to be met and people to get in the loop and stuff like that, but you do have the ability to leverage a lot more than your own lab resources, a lot more than in fact, like when I was considering, like I applied for positions and considering academia, I wanted to do something ambitious, and one of the things that sort of face up is that, like, how are you going to do it with with a lab of like 5 people that you're going to be able to afford with a startup grant? And it was true. It was probably not possible. But now I can do that because I don't lead a group of 20 people, but I work with a group of 30 people that have this very similar goal. So and it is very much teamwork. You have to get along, you have to work well together, you have to do your part. You have to accept the fact that the decision made by the group or by the bosses, depending how leadership considers the suggestion from the group. That's going to be what you're going to go for. So yeah, don't have that freedom. But I personally really respect people that I work with right now. I really value their opinion. So I don't feel like I'm doing I get told what to do as much as I put in my opinion in a pot, and if the consensus goes in that direction, we get to do what I want. But again, with also the safety of the fact that I don't have to be right. There's a lot of people that work with me that tell me whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, whether it's worth doing or not. And as long as you respect those people and you respect their opinion and you like to be a team player, then that makes a difference. And I just didn't realize how stark the difference is. I think the incentive structure of academia and industry is very, very different. So again, I think it's something that should weigh heavily on how you want to work in the future.
I think I'd like to add in that, like, this concept of, you have to convince your teammates or convince your leadership team or convince this is something that's going on everywhere. And all the communication skills you were learning all along of how to pitch your project and stuff like that, whether you're academic or your industry, are you officially doing it in a grant, or are you soft skilling, this is the best idea and this is my team? I think both of those things are going on everywhere and valuable and are never going to stop.
Mm.
So those are all great. I love hearing the industry perspective too.
Mhm.
I think I
found-
will add on from the academic side too. I think, we keep talking about freedom, and I think there is freedom for good and for bad on the academic side. And some of that is you're free to do everything you want to fight and scrape and scratch your way to accomplish. And so that can mean like, yeah, you can do more things, but you spend less time doing things and more time, clearing the path for your people on your team to do things. And so a lot of your job is really like guidance, but also like on the admin or, internal politics or this side, taking care of those things to clear the path for other people to do well and to have success. And I guess as you move up, more and more of your energy and time goes into these things. And how do you like that? Because that is actually a lot of a PI job and role, is not just doing the science. I'd say I spend a lot of my time on these other things too. And I think I didn't appreciate that beforehand. I thought, oh, I'm going to have the freedom to do all this science, whereas you have the freedom to be doing the science you want to be doing, but it's up to you to basically brutally carve your schedule to get more science into it. And that's a tough skill and something to do. And so you're free to work on as many things or as little things as much as you like. There's almost too much freedom sometimes would be maybe their side.
Yeah, that makes sense. Also the money, of course, you have to raise money. You're free to do any research, but you also have to be able to get funding for it. No, that's really interesting. To everyone in the community, if you have questions, feel free to unmute yourself, raise your hand, put it in the chat. I want to hear from you also, from all of you. So for people who are on the edge or who are undecided, like what do I do? What do I do after my PhD, after my postdoc? What are pieces of advice that you could give to get to even to find your decision, to make that decision or explore your options? I know that it sounds like you all at least investigated different options in both academia and industry. So that's an interesting first point, but maybe you have more things that you would give as an advice for people who are unsure.
I can jump in first and just say, update your resume. Oh, I know everyone's least favorite thing to do it, but especially as Hartland was talking about some of those skills of clearing the path, providing that little bit of shade. These type of skills are they're challenging to find, but they're really valuable once you do have them. So if you can update your resume and really highlight more of those PI responsibilities of your background, and say how it's more about carving out the right scope, assembling the right team, continuing to move everyone along in the right direction. Those are going to be different types of roles that you'll probably ultimately end up for, maybe more on the management and leadership track. But really, I'd say knowing what your core skills are that you got out of your PhD or your postdoc and making sure those are highlighted in your resume in the top way. Because as you speak to recruiters, it's like, okay, great. You better, every recruiter is going to ask, can you send over your resume when this is done? And I think just having that ready to go and it's amazing how much 6 hours of a timing window can really be the difference. If you have it ready to go, I can send it on out. The hiring manager happens to be looking at their email. It can come down to the wire as far as timing goes. So the more upfront work that you can do to be prepared is just the more opportunities you'll find yourself in.
Ryan, do you have advice for people on how to reshape their CVs away from an academic one and towards an industry one? So I'm listening to you this whole time, basically taking notes on what's the terminology you want to hear, how to rephrase my job and to refocus on a different skill set and actually have that show up in a CV. Because I think as we're academically trained, all the CVs start to look the same and you're told this is what you do, and they're bringing out the skill sets that academics are looking for. And I would have had no idea how to put together the type of CV off the same position that you would be interested in. So if you have guidance on that for, I think, trainees would be really helpful. Absolutely.
No, and thanks for the question too. I'll give as much as I can come up in my mind right now. I know as soon as the meeting's done, I'm going to go, oh, that was a great one. So I'll send out an email afterwards if it doesn't come up. But I think the communication skills and cross-functional working skills are going to be key to highlight there. Hartland, when you were talking about just sort of clearing the path and doing a lot of the admin work associated with that, I'd say that's going to be more things like scope preparation is probably a good term to throw in there. Navigating through ambiguity is going to be a key one that a lot of companies look for, especially if they're a smaller company, because, you know, the reality is I think Giorgio was saying like, oh, you could have 5, 10, or maybe 100 people working on a very narrow focus. And when the focus is that narrow, it is a realistic outcome to be like, guys, there's a lot of funding in this area, so we're going to pivot and go like this. And so that ability to quickly adapt to new environments and navigate through that ambiguity, these are key things to highlight that I can't say I know, but I surely assume are present in a lot of the experience that everyone on this call has. So, so those are the ones that come to mind now. Let me do a little bit of thinking on this, and I can send out an email afterwards once my thoughts materialize there. But I'd say probably those are the 2 or 3 most top ones for me now.
I think, Hartland, I would strongly suggest to your PhD student to use their friends a lot. I look over friends or people that I kind of know a lot over the CVs just to give an idea, sort of like, is this something that would fly or not? And it's sometimes hard, like it's hard to say that there's no real blueprint, but there's really no big no-goes. A lot of times, you know, you see a CV and it's like, this is just, I didn't get it. So I can, so I think that can be cleared out very easily with, yeah, just use your friends in general.
So I'd say my advice for how to navigate is to do a lot of informational interviews, talk to a lot of people, look at, you know, join LinkedIn, friend everyone who's in your network, then see who's in your friends' networks, see who you'd be interested in talking to, ask for an introduction, and just really network and talk to a lot of people to explore. I think that's the most useful thing I did. I took a good 6 months to do that before really jumping into the industry search. I did not update my CV early enough, and I will say that recruiters, when you start talking to them, and so that's the other thing on LinkedIn is you can connect with a lot of recruiters, and they're like instantly going to tell you about a bunch of different jobs and want to get on the phone with you. They want your CV ASAP, like, so it really is true. So definitely do that as well.
Awesome, thank you. Giorgio, do you have any other advice on how to come to a decision? I know you also had both academic and industry opportunities.
Yeah, I think this is once you have the opportunities, it's very dependent. I think so. I really don't know how to suggest, but I think when it takes time, it's sort of from an academic perspective, the academic path is fairly clear. There's a cycle. You know, right about now, whoever wants to apply to an academic position should have already applied to maybe 20 of them. Not to discourage anyone that hasn't, but that's usually the routine by mid-October. In industry, it's a revolving door. So you have to you kind of have to start earlier. I think what Jamie said is probably the best. I talked to a lot of people that made the transition, and just to get the lay of the land, these events are key to even understand the landscape. And it's a complicated landscape, and you know, there's a lot of things that Ryan couldn't squeeze into the half-hour presentation that are also important, maybe not as important. And so to learn in the landscape of industry from an academic point can be very hard because we don't get exposed to it. So learning the landscape of industry it's kind of like the minimum, so that you're applying to all the opportunities that are there, or the opportunities that you really care about. And a lot of things that that have been said here, like there are always caveats. You know, I do a job in industry that does not depend on programs. I do pure research. I support 15 to 20 programs in different ways. So if one of them gets cut, I don't have any, you know, I'm sorry for it, but like I don't risk my job. So it all depends, but it's, and that might only be the 5% of positions in a company, right? So in order to be in the right time to apply to that position and finding and having the right skills, or find the right manager that's looking for maybe skill, maybe potential, right, in a specific skill, it's hard. I mean, I've been hired for a single cell RNA position and having zero experience on it because my boss trusted that I could learn it in face of what I did before. So I was lucky, but if you can maximize your luck by amplifying the search space, which takes time.
I might just quickly add one more note to that is, you know, if the project gets killed, do we get reorged? Do we have to look for a different project as well? The average tenure for data scientists, and this is for the Bay Area, but with the entire workforce becoming more remote, I think there's a grain of truth in all of this, but average tenure is about 18 months. It blows my mind, 18 months. And I mean, it takes you probably, you know, 3 to 6 months to even get that hire in the first place, figure out what you want, train them up. So, you know, if you don't like something in industry, you don't have to stay. You know, this isn't our sort of parents' workforce industry where you work for one company for 35 years. Like, you know, you can work for 10 companies in 35 years, get a new sign on as you go to every different one. And really, I mean, it's just sad to say this, but like, you can transfer jobs within a year. And if you're like in a product management role, realistically, you're not even launching a product in a year. So you can do your whole career without ever really contributing to major work and just rack up the cash if that's what you're looking for. I wouldn't recommend it, but it is an option that a lot of people tend to be taking, and you can't really be mad at them, you know, for using the system like that. So, but really, I think
recruiters, Ryan.
I know it's terrible. I'm part of the problem. I know, but really just do what's important to you at that current time. And that's going to continuously change and evolve over time. So just always figure out what your personal values are, look to them again every sort of 1 to 2 years. And, you know, if what you're doing isn't lining up with those, you're totally fine. No guilt at all to go find something new. So, and reach out to me if that is the case, but seriously, you guys have a lot of power. So don't forget it.
Thank you. I think that's a perfect, encouraging last note to end the session with some confidence and trust that you're fine no matter what, as long as you stick to your values and reevaluate if the position that you're in is fulfilling and aligning with your values, I think. So yeah, we're at the end of the session. We'll keep you posted regarding the sessions and job postings, etc. And I think I just want to thank our speakers very much for joining us today and sharing their experiences. We really appreciate it. Thanks to all the community members. And if any more questions come up, we can always still answer questions or do another session that is more focused on anything. If something comes up, let us know. And thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.